Hi guys, Happy New Year. I hope you guys are feeling fresh and ready to start out this new year. I definitely am feeling super pumped. Today I'm standing in my studio. I have a blank canvas in front of me, and today I am going to finally do painting number 5 in my New Mexico collection. This is going to be the last painting in the collection. I am super excited about this painting because I am going to be painting the Carlsbad Caverns that you can visit in Carlsbad, New Mexico. The picture that I'm going to be referencing today while painting is a picture that I took when I was inside the cavern, and you can see these humongous stalagmites just sticking up out of the ground. And they're so beautiful. There's these greens and yellows, there's all these weird textures. And there's also thousands of stalactites just gracefully hanging off the ceiling, which I think this is really going to be a cool painting. Now this picture has a lot of detail. It's almost a little confusing. I'm going to show you guys how I simplify the subject matter and turn it into a painting that makes sense. So basically, I'm going to show you guys how to paint caves, how to paint the inside of a cave. So I'm really excited to share this with you guys and take you through the process. I hope you guys enjoy this video. I hope it's interesting and fun. So without further ado, let's go ahead and do painting number 5 in my New Mexico collection. All right, before I even start this painting, the first thing I want to do is I want to get rid of this white canvas. So what I'm going to do is use some thinner. It's paint thinner. Since I'm using oil paint, the paint is very thick, and I want to thin it down to create like a watercolor wash on my canvas. I like to add this warm wash to my paintings, mainly my landscape paintings, because what I do is when I go back in with thicker paint and I start to paint in my subject matter, I actually like to let this wash show through the color that I put on the canvas. So it's called broken color. So I don't completely cover the canvas with paint. What I do is I do the wash, I put a wash down, and then I let it show through the colors that I put on top of it. And what it does is it gives this really beautiful warmth throughout the painting. So you can see these warm tones kind of shining through the paint that I put on the canvas. So now that I've done that, I'm going to actually start sketching in my subject matter with paint. I'm going to use a stiff small brush, and I am going to use thinned paint to start sketching in my subject. I don't want to use thick paint to sketch it in. And the very first thing I'm doing here is dividing my canvas into fourths. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to imagine this grid on my subject matter. I have the picture of what I'm painting up on a TV, and I'm just going to look at the TV, imagine that grid on the picture. And if you stand far back and look at your subject matter, you can kind of see this better, this imaginary grid. And you can even take your hand and go like this to your subject matter and create that imaginary grid, and you can kind of see where everything lines up. And then I'm going to slowly start mapping out the shapes. I'm not going to focus on every little crevice or odd shape. I'm going to look at each element in my reference, and I'm going to think, okay, well, what's the basic shape? Is it a circle? Is it a square? Is it a rectangle? A great way to think about it is imagine if you were seeing this as like a silhouette. You wouldn't see every little detail inside the shape. You would just see the basic shape. So I'm just kind of like imagining that I am seeing this as a silhouette, and I'm just drawing in the silhouette of the shapes. Back here, there are all these stalactites. I'm not going to draw those in individually because that will just take too much time. I'm actually going to go back in when I start using paint and paint those in. Now that I have a silhouette of my elements, I'm going to start going in and just kind of suggesting some of those more organic shapes that I see on these stalagmites. And I'll also start drawing in some of the shadows. So I'm just refining my shapes. This is really a complex organic shape. And since it's so complex, I mean, there's so many crevices and just shadows everywhere. I am really going to hone more in on the sketch instead of kind of just get like a simple basic idea and then start going in with paint. So I'm just going to be more detailed with my sketch this time, just so I can make sure I have everything laid out correctly and it doesn't end up looking weird at the end. It's really important, guys, that you learn how to draw with paint, especially if you're going to do some detailed sketches like this before you start the painting. I think it's really important to know how to draw with the paint because doing these detailed sketches in just one color and mapping out your shadows, it's a really, really good way to just simply lay out your composition so you can see it and make sure you get everything right before you start going in with thicker paint. All right, I've gotten the sketch. I now want to start going in with color. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my dark shapes. And I always start with my dark shapes. Every painting, start with dark shapes. As you can see, I've already kind of mapped out my dark shapes. So I'm just going to go back in and start laying in all of my dark colors. And what I'm doing is I've kind of thinned the paint out a little bit because I kind of want to create a little bit of transparency. I think the transparency is going to look very interesting, especially for the background, because I don't want the main focus to be the background. I want it to be these stalagmites and then some of the stalactites hanging from the ceiling. So I'm gonna really make a lot of the background just dark, but there is light in the background. So I can kind of suggest that by thinning the paint, which makes it more transparent so you can see through it. And I'm going to use that thinned transparent color for most of the background. I'm also using this dark color to my advantage, and I'm going back in and reshaping some of those stalagmites. Also, guys, I'm not just using one solid color for this background. I am seeing a lot of color in the background, the cave walls. There's so many different colors. There's reds, yellows, blues. So I'm just kind of mixing colors. So in one area might be more red and another might be more yellow. So I'm just kind of mixing in different colors as I go. So I'm not just making it all one flat color. And this is just kind of more realistic to what it actually looks like. Now that the background's laid in, I'm going to start focusing on some of my main elements, which are these stalagmites. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting in some of the shadows on these stalagmites. And I'm also going to look for saturated colors. There's a lot of very beautiful saturated green and yellow colors on these stalagmites. I'm going to capture that when I start doing the shadows. That color is really going to make this painting pop, and I'm going to kind of make it a little bit more dramatic than how it looks in the picture. I mean, this picture is already super dramatic looking, but I'm going to try to push it even more. That's actually why I decided to make the background pretty much completely dark. In the picture, you can see there's actually some pretty bright highlights here in the background, but I really want this to be dramatic. So I decided to just, completely make the background dark. This blue color on the stalagmite that I'm painting right now, this was actually a light that was shining on the stalagmite. It was a blue light, and it's just really creating this beautiful contrast between this green. There's a green color in here that's really beautiful, and then this blue. Now this looks quite flat right now, but I am just trying to put down some color and mainly focus on my shadows. Sometimes you have to trust the painting process. If you're painting and it's just looking really flat, sometimes you just have to trust the process and know that if you keep going and keep painting and adding those brighter highlights and saturated colors, your painting will just slowly come together and you will have a beautiful painting. So I'm just slowly working on this. I'm going to be slowly building up brighter and brighter lights and more saturated tones. There are so many interesting textures in these cave formations, and I don't want to go in with a small brush and draw in every single texture. So what I'm doing is I'm really using my big brushes to my advantage, and I'm kind of just letting the brush do the work for me. And I want to create texture with the bristles instead of drawing in the texture. I found the painting process to be a little bit easier if you completely lay your composition out on the canvas first and just kind of block in your shapes, block in your shadows, block in lights, just basically block in colors. And as you can see, this is what I've done here on the canvas. And after you've done that, you can step back, look at your painting, and then think, okay, what do I need to do next? Do I need to fix a shape? Do I need to darken a shadow? Do I need to add more highlights? This just really gives you a way to see the whole thing in a very simplified way. This initial stage is the foundation, and once you are able to accomplish the foundation and stand back from it and look at it, and you can see that it is already starting to come together, that is what you want to focus on accomplishing at the beginning of the painting. You want that foundation. Okay, guys, again, here I am letting the brush do the work for me. So these highlights that you see here at the base of the stalagmite, there's all these like little folds and crevices here in the stalagmite, and it's making it's like this dripping effect. There's like this dripping effect, and the light is shining on it. And you can actually see where the stalagmite has formed, and there's so many layers of this dripping effect. I'm just letting the brush do the work for me. I'm kind of taking the brush and I'm pushing it against the canvas. And then as I go down, I take the brush off the canvas like that. And what it does is it creates a highlight that has a thicker top and then a thinner bottom as it goes down. And that creates like that effect like it's dripping down. Here again, guys, the base of the stalagmite is pretty much fully lit with light, and there's all of these weird textures. And I'm just kind of moving the brush back and forth like this to kind of suggest the texture. All right, I'm gonna add some deeper black tones to the background of the painting because I really want these stalagmites to really pop. Right now, they're a little bit lost because this background is fairly light. I'm just gonna darken that a little bit. I'm gonna make it a little bit more opaque, but I'm gonna try to keep it still kind of this transparency just a little bit. I'm gonna kind of let that transparency show through because I think it's really gonna make for an interesting looking painting overall. you can see the undertone that I put on the canvas through the start color, which I really like personally. I think it kind of makes it look less flat. Now this is a bunch of empty space. I'm going to go back in and I'm actually going to add some stalactites hanging from the ceiling. I'm just going to use some lighter paint and kind of try to just suggest them at first and get a feeling for it. So how I'm putting in these stalactites is I'm taking a lighter color, not too light because I still don't want to take away from the stalagmites. This is a synthetic haired brush, so it's softer and it's a short flat, and this is helping me really get these crisp lines. I press my brush onto the canvas like this, and as I move down, I release the pressure. And this creates like a point because the stalactites, they start, their bases are fat, and when they come down, they meet in a point. And this brush is like the perfect brush to do that with because it's flat and it's sharp. And the stalactites are usually in like little pods, little groups. For example, these fainter ones right here, or this one. This is like a pod of stalactites, but there's also all these little ones kind of around. And I'm just kind of suggesting the most prominent ones. I don't want to paint in every stalactite because I don't want to take away from the stalagmites. And that is how you paint caves. This is painting number 5 in my New Mexico collection. So I hope you guys have an awesome, awesome day. Thank you so much for watching, and always remember to stay creative.